3 days before Christmas, 72-year-old Evelyn Carter stood barefoot on the frozen porch of the house she had lived in for 41 years while her son carried her belongings to the curb like garbage. Not boxes, not carefully packed memories, trash bags. Black plastic trash bags tied with red Christmas ribbon left over from her granddaughter's school recital. Snow fell softly across the driveway while strangers walked through her living room, discussing where they would put a wine cellar. "You should have agreed to assisted living months ago," her daughter Diane said without looking at her. "This is getting embarrassing." Embarrassing. That word hurt more than the cold, because Evelyn still remembered the night she stayed awake, sewing Diane's prom dress by hand after the electricity had almost been shut off. She remembered feeding those children canned soup for weeks so they could keep piano lessons. She remembered the mortgage payments she and her husband Walter scraped together one brutal winter after the factory cut his hours. And now her children stood inside that same house, talking about square footage and market value while snow gathered on their mother's slippers. Then her son Michael said the sentence Evelyn would replay in her head for the next year. "Mom, this house is wasted on somebody your age." If stories about betrayal, second chances, and impossible comebacks move you, subscribe now and stay until the end. Because what happened inside Room 7 of that forgotten motel changed far more than one old woman's life. And the people who threw Evelyn away would eventually beg her for mercy. The worst part wasn't even the sale. It was how carefully they had planned it. 6 months earlier, Michael had convinced Evelyn to sign what he called temporary estate paperwork after she forgot to pay the water bill during a bad flu. He framed it as protection. "Just in case something happens," he'd told her gently. "This way Diane and I can help with finances." She trusted him. Why wouldn't she? He was her son. The documents turned out to be power of attorney papers attached to a property transfer agreement she barely understood when she signed it in the hospital waiting room after a cataract appointment. Now the house belonged to them, legally, completely. By noon, the for sale sign was already gone. Sold. The buyers arrived in 2 black SUVs, while Evelyn still sat outside beside her things. A tall woman in a white wool coat walked through the front door holding a coffee cup and laughing about opening up the kitchen. Evelyn stared at the kitchen window. That kitchen. Walter had built those cabinets himself during the summer of 1989. He'd burned his hand installing the stove because he refused to hire anyone else. Now strangers were redesigning it before she'd even left. "Mom," Diane sighed impatiently, "the facility can still hold your room until tonight." Facility. Not home. Not apartment. Room. Like she was being stored somewhere. "I'm not going," Evelyn said quietly. Michael rubbed his forehead hard enough to show he'd rehearsed this moment. "Then where exactly are you planning to go?" Neither child offered an answer, because neither one intended to take her in. The silence revealed everything. Diane finally checked her phone. "We can't keep doing this. I have guests coming for Christmas Eve." Guests. Evelyn almost laughed. 40 years raising children, and now holiday guests mattered more than their mother sleeping in the snow. By 4 o'clock, both cars were gone. So were her children. The buyers stayed inside discussing renovations, while Evelyn sat beside 2 trash bags, 1 suitcase, and an old cookie tin holding $312 in cash.
The sun was disappearing when a city bus finally stopped near the corner. The driver opened the door, looked at her bags, then looked at the house. "You all right, ma'am?" Evelyn almost said yes automatically.
Instead, for the first time in her life, she answered honestly, "No." The driver helped her carry everything aboard without charging fare. She rode for nearly an hour without knowing where she was going. Downtown looked beautiful for Christmas. That made everything worse. Store windows glowed gold and red. Families carried wrapped gifts through snowy sidewalks. Restaurants overflowed with warm light and music. Everywhere she looked, people belonged somewhere. Except her. Eventually, she got off near a highway diner because the smell of coffee drifting through the cold air reminded her she hadn't eaten all day. The waitress was young, exhausted, and heavily pregnant. She brought Evelyn coffee without asking for payment first.
"You can warm up as long as you need,"
she said softly. Kindness almost broke Evelyn more than cruelty had. At the counter beside her, two truckers were arguing about property auctions. "Place is cursed," one laughed. "Silver Pines Motel should have been bulldozed 20 years ago." The other snorted. "Bank's desperate. They dropped the asking price again." Evelyn listened quietly. Old Motel, near Route 16. 12 rooms, half abandoned. Nobody wanted it because a man had died there years earlier, and local rumors scared buyers away. "What's wrong with it?" Evelyn finally asked. Both men turned. The older one shrugged. "Everything. Roof leaks, heat barely works. Town wants to condemn it. Still cheaper than rent nowadays," the younger one muttered. The waitress leaned closer after they left. "You thinking about Silver Pines?" Evelyn surprised herself. "Maybe." The waitress hesitated. "My uncle cleaned rooms there years ago. Said the owner kept one room locked all the time." "What room?" 7. The girl gave a nervous little laugh. "People say somebody's still waiting inside." Outside, snow thickened against the diner windows. Evelyn looked down at the tiny amount of money in her cookie tin. Then she thought about the facility, about shared bathrooms, about dying quietly in a room her children paid strangers to manage. And suddenly something hard and stubborn woke up inside her. The same stubbornness that survived layoffs, hospital bills, Walter's funeral, 40 years of sacrifice. "Where is it?" she asked. The motel sat 30 miles outside town near an abandoned stretch of highway swallowed slowly by pine forest. The taxi driver refused to take her all the way to the entrance once he saw the broken sign. "You sure about this place?" he asked nervously. Silver Pines Motor Lodge appeared through the snowfall like something forgotten by time itself. Half the neon letters were dead, only P. The parking lot was empty except for an old pickup truck covered in ice. The office windows were dark, but one thing stood out immediately. Room 7. Unlike every other room in the motel, its porch light was on. A single yellow bulb glowing steadily through the storm. Evelyn stepped closer slowly, dragging her suitcase through the snow. Then she saw the note taped inside the office window. The paper was yellow with age, the handwriting shaky, but still readable. "To whoever buys this place, don't open room 7 until you're ready to know why they really left." The first key Evelyn found did not open room 7. It opened the office. The door stuck halfway because ice had swollen the frame, so she pushed her shoulder into it twice before it gave with a sound like an old bone cracking. Cold air moved through the lobby.
Not a draft, a current, as if the building had been breathing without anyone noticing. The office smelled of dust, wet wood, mouse droppings, and something faintly sweet, like old carpet cleaner. A dead Christmas wreath hung behind the front desk, its red bow faded almost pink. On the counter sat a brass bell, a cracked guest register, and a ceramic bowl filled with motel keys attached to green plastic tags. Room 1,
Room 3, Room 5, Room 9, Room 12, no Room 7. Evelyn set her suitcase beside the desk and rubbed warmth back into her fingers. The taxi had already vanished down the road. She had no car, no family coming, no place else to go, and a motel she did not yet officially own until the bank office opened the next morning. Still, for the first time that day, no one was telling her to leave. That alone felt like shelter. Behind the counter was a small room with a metal filing cabinet, a cot, and an ancient space heater that looked dangerous even unplugged. On the wall, someone had taped a handwritten list. Winter rules. Keep pipes dripping. Don't run washer and office heater together. Lock rear door after sunset. If room 7 light turns on, ignore it. Evelyn stared at the last line until her eyes watered. Then she laughed once, sharp and tired. "Wonderful," she whispered. "I bought a motel with instructions for ghosts." She slept that first night in the office with her coat on, wrapped in a dusty curtain she pulled from the supply closet. Every sound woke her. The groan of pipes, the tick of ice against the windows, a thud somewhere behind the building that might have been a branch, an animal, or a person. At 2:13 in the morning, the bell on the counter rang. Once. Clear. Bright. Evelyn sat upright so quickly pain shot through her back. The lobby was empty. The bell sat where it had been. Beyond the front windows, snow drifted across the parking lot in silver sheets, and room 7's porch light still burned. She did not sleep after that. At dawn, Silver Pines looked less haunted and more pathetic. The motel was a long, low building shaped like an L, with 12 doors facing the parking lot. The paint had once been forest green, but had faded to the color of old peas. The ice machine was dead. The pool behind the office was covered with plywood. A rusted vending machine leaned near the walkway, still advertising candy bars that cost 65 cents. Evelyn walked from room to room with a ring of keys she found under the counter. Room 1 had a collapsed bed frame and wallpaper peeling in strips. Room 2 smelled of mildew but had a working lamp. Room 3 had a hole in the bathroom ceiling, large enough to show insulation. Room 4 was full of stacked chairs. Room 5 was surprisingly clean, as if someone had left in a hurry but meant to return. Room 6 had no mattress. Then came Room 7. The door was painted the same green as the others, but the lock was different, newer, heavy. A deadbolt had been installed above the handle and another below it. Someone had screwed a strip of metal across the frame, not to keep people out casually, but to make opening it difficult even with force. No number hung on the door. The outline of the missing 7 was visible where dust and sun had aged the paint around it. Evelyn touched the cold metal. A sound came from inside. Not a voice. Not exactly. A small shift, like paper sliding off a table. She stepped back. The old Evelyn, the one who spent a lifetime smoothing over conflict, might have walked away and pretended she heard nothing. But that woman had been left on a sidewalk in the snow. The woman standing at Silver Pines now had nothing left to lose except fear. She returned to the office, found a flashlight, then checked the bank papers in her purse. By 10:30 that morning, after a painfully long call from the diner payphone and a bus ride into town, she signed the final transfer documents at a branch office where the manager looked at her the way people look at someone buying a burned-out car. "You understand the property is sold as is?" he said. "I understand." "No warranty, no refund. Outstanding repair citations become your responsibility."
"I understand."
"And, Mrs. Carter," he lowered his voice, "this is not an investment property. Realistically, demolition may cost more than the land is worth." Evelyn took the pen from his hand.
"Then I suppose I'd better not demolish it." The manager did not smile. By evening, Silver Pines Motor Lodge belonged to her. All of it. The leaking roof, the dead vending machine, the locked room 7. Hers. She spent the next 2 days cleaning enough to make the office livable. She bought canned soup, instant coffee, batteries, duct tape, bleach, and a second-hand electric blanket from the thrift store. The pregnant waitress from the diner, whose name was Nora, sent her uncle out with a toolbox and 3 bags of old towels. His name was Ray. He was 76, narrow-shouldered, and moved slowly because of a hip replacement that had never healed right. He wore a navy watch cap and had the suspicious eyes of a man who had seen too much kindness turn into obligation. "Nora says you bought the Pines," he said.
"I did."
"On purpose?" Evelyn almost smiled. "Mostly." Ray looked toward room 7 before looking at her. "You got the key?" "No." "Good." He stepped into the lobby and set down the towels. That was the first real warning. Not the note, not the light. Ray's face. For 3 hours he fixed what he could, tightened a faucet, replaced 2 outlet covers, showed her which breaker tripped when the microwave ran. He refused payment until Evelyn pressed $12 into his hand and said, "I won't start this place by owing people." He accepted the money reluctantly. At the door, he stopped. "Harold Whitcomb owned this motel before the bank took it," he said. "Quiet man, kept to himself. Wasn't always like that. Years ago, people said Silver Pines was the cleanest stop on Route 16. Families stayed here in the summer. Salesmen, newlyweds who couldn't afford the lake resorts." "What happened?" Ray's jaw shifted. "Highway moved. Business died. Then Harold's wife disappeared." The lobby seemed to grow colder. "Disappeared?" "Some said she left. Some said worse. Police never proved anything. Harold locked room 7 after that. Wouldn't rent it. Wouldn't clean it.
Wouldn't talk about it. Last winter, before he died, I came to fix a burst pipe. He made me swear not to touch that door."
"Why?"
Ray looked at the dark window behind her. "He said room 7 was waiting for the right person." Evelyn did not answer. Ray left before sunset. That night, the first guest arrived. He was a truck driver named Calvin Brooks, stranded when his rig broke down 5 miles away. He stood in the office doorway with snow on his beard and embarrassment in his eyes. "I saw the light," he said. "You open?" Evelyn looked at the broken ceiling tile, the dead phone, the old register, the space heater humming behind her. Then she looked at the man's shaking hands. "Yes," she said.
but breakfast is canned peaches and coffee." Calvin laughed like he had not heard anything funny in weeks. She gave him room 5 for $20. The next morning he fixed the office steps without being asked. Then Nora came by with day-old muffins from the diner. Then Ray returned with a box of spare bulbs. Then a woman named Tessa arrived in a dented sedan with a 6-year-old boy asleep in the back seat and a bruise half hidden under makeup. She said she only needed one night. Evelyn gave her room 2 and did not ask questions until Tessa was ready to answer. By Christmas Eve, 4 rooms had heat, 3 had clean sheets, and someone had strung lights around the dead motel sign. Not beautiful lights, mismatched lights, blue, white, red, one strand blinking too fast. But from the road, Silver Pines no longer looked abandoned. It looked stubborn. That night, Evelyn made soup in the office microwave while Calvin fixed the old radio, and Tessa's little boy taped paper snowflakes to the lobby window. Ray sat in the corner with coffee, pretending not to enjoy himself. For a few hours, nobody was discarded. Nobody was a burden. Nobody was too old, too broken, too poor, or too late. Then the bell rang. Everyone heard it. One clean sound from the front counter, but no one stood near it.
The room went silent. Ray's face lost color. Outside, across the parking lot, room 7's light flickered once, then the door opened by 2 inches. Evelyn walked toward it before anyone could stop her. Inside the room, the air smelled dry and sealed, nothing like the rest of the motel. Her flashlight beam moved across a made bed, a covered mirror, a desk, and cardboard boxes stacked neatly against the wall. On the pillow lay a motel key with a green plastic tag, Room 7. Beside it sat an envelope. Her name was written across the front. Evelyn Carter. Evelyn did not touch the envelope at first. For a few seconds, she simply stood in the doorway of Room 7, while everyone behind her forgot to breathe. Her name on that paper looked impossible. Not just written, expected. The letters were careful and old-fashioned, the kind of handwriting that belonged to people who still owned fountain pens and addressed Christmas cards by hand. Evelyn Carter. Not Mrs. Carter. Not to whom it may concern, Evelyn Carter, as if whoever placed it there had known exactly who would one day open that door. Ray whispered from behind her, "Harold never mentioned you." "I never met Harold," Evelyn said. Her voice sounded calm, but her hands were shaking. She picked up the envelope. It was not dusty like the desk or the boxes. Someone had placed it there recently, or else sealed it so well that time had avoided it. Inside was a single photograph and a folded letter. The photograph showed Walter, her Walter, younger, maybe 45, standing beside a man Evelyn did not recognize in front of the Silver Pines sign when it still glowed bright and whole. Walter wore his gray work jacket and had one hand raised like he'd been caught mid-laugh. For one dizzy moment, Evelyn forgot where she was. She sat down on the edge of the bed. Walter had never mentioned this motel, not once in 41 years. The letter was worse. "Dear Mrs. Carter, if you are reading this, then Harold was right." He said the truth has a way of finding people who have already lost enough to recognize it. "My name is Leonard Price. I was an attorney once, not a good one, not by the end. I helped men steal from people who trusted paperwork more than they trusted their fear. Your husband came to Silver Pines in 1996 with evidence he did not fully understand. He believed several older homeowners were being pressured into selling land for less than half its value. He was right. The same people are still doing it. And if they have reached you,
then your children may not be victims of their scheme. They may be part of it. Evelyn read the last sentence twice, then a third time. The room tilted slightly. Behind her, Tessa said, "Mrs. Evelyn?" But Evelyn could not answer. She was staring at the boxes stacked against the wall. Each one had a label. County sales, private transfers, estate pressure cases, Route 16 development, Carter property. Her knees nearly gave out. Ray guided her into the chair by the desk without asking. Calvin stepped into the room and removed the first box like it might explode. Inside were file folders, dozens of them. Photocopies of deeds, appraisal reports, handwritten notes, old newspaper clippings, maps with red circles, letters between companies with names Evelyn recognized from the documents Michael had left on her kitchen table. Harrington Land Group. That was the buyer of her house. The woman in the white wool coat had represented them. Michael had called her the developer. But inside the folder, her name appeared beside another title, Director of Acquisitions. And beneath that, clipped to a consulting invoice, was Michael Carter's signature. Evelyn's son had billed the company $8,000 for Family Asset Transition Services. Family Asset. That was what they called her home. Not childhood memories, not Walter's roses, not the kitchen where Diane learned to bake. An asset. Transitioned. For a moment, Evelyn could not feel anger.
Anger would have been easier. What she felt was something colder, heavier, almost clean. Understanding. Michael had not panicked. Diane had not been confused. They had not been manipulated by strangers into thinking assisted living was best. They had helped. The truth entered her slowly, like winter through a crack in the wall. Walter had known something. Years before his death, he had found a pattern. Elderly owners along Route 16 being talked into signing over homes, old cabins, roadside properties, motel lots, and farmland, just before rezoning announcements made that land valuable. Families were told the buildings were worthless. Widows were told repairs would bankrupt them. Adult children were approached with cash offers and promises of easy inheritance. The old people were always made to feel unreasonable, unsafe, confused, a burden. Evelyn saw the word again and again in notes from different cases. Burden, difficult transition, family concern, capacity questions. It was not just cruelty, it was a method. Ray pulled out another folder. Harold kept all this? Evelyn opened the first page. Harold Whitcomb, owner of Silver Pines, had refused to sell in 2001 when Harrington Land Group wanted the motel and surrounding acreage for a planned commercial corridor. After that, inspectors began appearing. Health complaints, anonymous calls, insurance cancellations. A bank loan suddenly called in. The highway relocation finished what pressure had started. His wife, Clara, had not disappeared because of a crime of passion or local gossip. She had died after a fall in the motel office during a winter night when the power had been disconnected over a disputed bill Harold swore had already been paid. Room 7 had been her favorite room. She cleaned it herself every Friday, even when no one rented it. After her death, Harold sealed the room and used it as an archive, a memorial, a vault. Not because it was haunted,
because it held everything they had taken from him.
And somehow, Walter Carter had been helping him. Evelyn unfolded a yellowed note in Walter's handwriting. Harold, keep copies in room 7. If anything happens to me, do not give them to my family. I don't know who I can trust yet. M has been asking too many questions about property values. M. Michael. Her son had been 29 then, young enough that Evelyn still remembered buying him work shirts for his first office job. Old enough to have already started learning how money could make betrayal sound professional. Evelyn pressed Walter's note to her chest and closed her eyes. For years, she had believed her husband died with no secrets. Now she realized he had carried one alone because he was trying to protect her from the shape of their own family. The next morning, Nora called her cousin at the county records office. By afternoon, a retired paralegal named June arrived with reading glasses, a portable scanner, and the look of a woman who enjoyed war when it came in paper form. "This isn't a shoebox of rumors," June said after 2 hours. "This is a lawsuit with a roof over it." They worked through Christmas Day, not because Evelyn asked them to, because everyone at Silver Pines had been thrown away by somebody, and suddenly those boxes in room 7 felt personal. Tessa recognized the name of a landlord who had forced her aunt out of a duplex before it was rezoned. Calvin remembered delivering construction materials to a Harrington site 6 months before the company publicly claimed they had no development plans. Ray found a photo of himself from 20 years earlier, standing beside Harold at a town meeting. He stared at it for a long time without speaking. By December 27th, June had organized the files into stacks: clean evidence, supporting evidence, press material, legal questions. On December 28th, Evelyn called her son. Michael answered on the 3rd ring. "Mom?" His voice changed immediately, cautious but not soft. "Where are you?" "At Silver Pines Motor Lodge." Silence. Not confusion. Recognition. That told her everything. "You shouldn't be there," he said. "No," Evelyn replied. "I believe that's exactly where I should be." Another pause, then his tone lowered. "Listen to me very carefully. Whatever you think you found, you don't understand it." "There it is," Evelyn said. "What?" "The voice you used when you made me sign the papers." "Mom, this is complicated." "No. It was complicated when your father found it. It was complicated when Harold lost his wife. It became very simple when you put my things in trash bags." Michael exhaled sharply. "You're angry. I get that. Diane and I handled things badly." "Badly? We were trying to protect you." Evelyn looked through the office window at room 7. "From what? My house? My money? My choices?" "From yourself," he snapped, and then caught himself too late. There it was again, the real sentence beneath every polite one. Evelyn closed her eyes. For 1 second he was 8 years old again, standing in the kitchen with chocolate on his chin, asking if Santa would know they had no chimney. Then he was 46, selling her life through an invoice. "Come here," she said. "What?" "Come to the motel. Alone." "Mom, I'm not. If you don't come. The documents go to the newspaper tonight." He arrived at sunset in a leased black sedan that looked ridiculous in the cracked parking lot. He stepped out wearing a cashmere coat and the irritated face of a man forced to enter a place beneath him. His eyes moved quickly across the motel, the rooms, the broken sign, the guests watching from doorways.
Then he saw Evelyn standing in the office. For the first time since childhood, he looked afraid of her. "Let's talk privately," he said. "We are private enough." Tessa stood behind the desk with a pot of coffee. Calvin leaned near the doorway. Ray sat by the heater. June continued labeling folders without looking up. Michael lowered his voice.
"You don't want to do this in front of strangers." Evelyn smiled faintly. "These are not strangers. Strangers don't leave their mother in the snow." His face tightened. He placed a leather folder on the counter. "I can get you money," he said. "Real money. Enough to move somewhere decent. Diane and I can arrange a better facility, not the first one. A nice one, private room, garden, everything." There was a time when the offer might have sounded like rescue. Now it sounded like a lid being lowered over a box. Evelyn opened his leather folder. A settlement agreement, confidentiality clause, release of claims, medical evaluation requirement. She almost laughed. "You brought paperwork to room 7? Michael's patience cracked. "Do you have any idea what you're risking? These people will destroy you in court. They have lawyers. You have a condemned motel and a bunch of drifters." The room went still. Calvin's jaw moved. Tessa took one step forward. Evelyn raised her hand, stopping them. She wanted Michael's words to remain exactly where they landed. Drifters. That was what he saw. Not a mother with a child, not a veteran, not a pregnant waitress, not a retired man who still showed up when someone needed help. Just people without enough money to matter. Evelyn reached behind the counter and picked up Walter's note. She placed it in front of Michael. He recognized the handwriting instantly. All the color drained from his face. "Dad knew?" he whispered. "Yes." Michael looked suddenly younger. Not innocent, just exposed. "He didn't understand," Michael said. "Nobody understood how development worked back then." "Did he understand this?" Evelyn asked, sliding the consulting invoice across the counter. Michael stared at his own signature. He said nothing. That silence was the closest thing to a confession Evelyn would ever receive. She folded the settlement agreement in half and handed it back to him. "No." His eyes flicked up. "Mom." "No." "You're making a mistake." "I made my mistake when I trusted you with a pen." The sentence hit him harder than shouting would have. For a moment, Evelyn thought he might apologize. Really apologize. Not for getting caught, not for bad timing, for the thing itself. But Michael only picked up his folder and stepped back. "Diane won't forgive this," he said. Evelyn looked at the Christmas lights blinking across the lobby window. "Then tell Diane she can join the line." He left without another word. The sedan's tires spat dirty snow as it pulled away. That night, the first article went live at 9:42 p.m. Local widow finds room full of documents linking development firm to elder property scheme. By morning, 3 television vans were parked outside Silver Pines. By noon, Harrington Land Group issued a statement denying everything. By evening, 2 more elderly homeowners called the motel office asking for Evelyn Carter. And Room 7, the room everyone feared for 20 years, became the only room in town where people finally felt safe telling the truth. By the first week of January, Silver Pines Motor Lodge had more cameras in the parking lot than paying guests. Reporters stood under the broken sign with microphones tucked inside their coats, trying to make the motel look tragic from the right angle. They filmed the peeling paint, the cracked walkway, the half-dead neon letters, the old woman in a thrift store cardigan
who had somehow become the center of a statewide investigation. Evelyn hated every second of it, not because she feared attention, because every headline made her sound braver than she felt. The truth was, most mornings she woke before sunrise with her heart pounding, convinced she had ruined whatever was left of her life. Then she would hear movement outside the office. Ray clearing snow from the walkway. Nora dropping off muffins before her diner shift.
Tessa's little boy laughing because Calvin had taught him how to scrape frost off a windshield with an old gift card. And Evelyn would remember. She had already lost the life she was afraid of ruining. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Once the first article appeared, people started calling. Widows, retired couples, adult children who suddenly understood the great offer they accepted for their parents' property had not been great at all. A former city planner sent anonymous emails showing that Harrington Land Group had known about rezoning plans months before public meetings. A title clerk admitted she had been told to process elderly sellers quickly before families changed their minds. A nurse from a private care facility called to say several residents had been pressured into signing property documents while medicated. Every story sounded different, but the pattern was always the same. A house became too much. A parent became unsafe. A son or daughter became practical. Then the land changed hands, and money moved upward, never back. Room 7 turned into a command center. June worked at the desk beneath the covered mirror, sorting evidence into labeled boxes. Calvin installed a lock on the door and slept in room 6 with a baseball bat beside the bed, though Evelyn told him that was unnecessary. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "I spent 22 years hauling freight through back roads at night. People only say protection is unnecessary when they've never needed it." Tessa answered phones. She had a voice that sounded soft until someone tried to bully her. Then it became steel. "No, sir. Mrs. Carter is not accepting private settlement offers." "No, ma'am. You cannot speak to her children." "Yes, we are keeping copies." Ray fixed the old sign one letter at a time, not because it mattered legally, but because he said if Silver Pines was going to be on television, it should at least spell its own name correctly. On January 9th, the State Attorney General's office opened a formal inquiry. On January 10th, Harrington's stock fell. On January 11th, Michael called 27 times. Evelyn did not answer. Diane arrived instead. She came at noon in a cream-colored SUV with heated seats and a wreath still tied to the front grille. She looked out of place before she even stepped onto the cracked pavement. Perfect hair, perfect boots, perfect anger arranged carefully behind expensive sunglasses. Evelyn was in the lobby replacing sugar packets with Nora when Diane walked in without knocking. "This has gone far enough," Diane said. Not hello, not mom, not are you all right? Just a command. Evelyn closed the sugar tin. "Coffee?" Diane looked around the lobby as if poverty might stain her coat. "I'm not here for coffee." "No, you're here because cameras make shame harder to hide." Diane's face twitched. "You are destroying our family." Evelyn studied her daughter. Really studied her. The woman standing in front of her had Evelyn's cheekbones, Walter's eyes, and none of their humility. For years, Evelyn had excused Diane's coldness as stress. Marriage stress, work stress, motherhood stress. There had always been a reason, always something temporary that would soften later. But later had come, and this was what remained. "You put my belongings in trash bags," Evelyn said. Diane swallowed, irritated by the detail. "We were under pressure."
So was I when your father had cancer. I didn't put him on the curb. That is not fair. No, Evelyn said. It isn't. But it is accurate. Diane removed her sunglasses. For a second, Evelyn saw exhaustion under the makeup. Fear, too. Not guilt. Fear of consequences. Michael made the arrangements, Diane said quietly. I didn't know everything. Evelyn almost felt pity. Almost.
Did you know the house was being sold? Yes, but did you know I didn't want to leave? Mom, you were being irrational. Did you know I sat outside in the snow? Diane looked away. There it was. Not surprise. Memory. She had known. Evelyn nodded slowly. Then you knew enough. Diane's eyes hardened. You think these people care about you? They're using you. The reporter, that paralegal, those motel people, they love the story. Poor old woman fights back. But when this is over, they'll go home and you'll be alone in this dump. From behind the office doorway, Tessa's little boy appeared holding a paper snowflake. It's not a dump, he said. Diane turned, startled. The boy walked to Evelyn and slipped his hand into hers. This is where we had Christmas. The room fell silent. Evelyn felt the child's small fingers tighten around hers. Diane looked at the boy, then at the lobby tree made from a broom handle, wire, and leftover motel lights. For one brief moment, something human passed across her face. Then it was gone. Mom, she said, lowering her voice, please, drop this. We can still fix it privately. Evelyn asked the only question that mattered. Would you be here if the article had never run? Diane did not answer. That was her answer. Evelyn opened the door. Then we have nothing to fix privately. Diane left, shaking with anger. That evening, a former Harrington assistant delivered the final piece. She arrived after dark, hood pulled low, hands trembling around a manila envelope. Her name was Paula Reyes. She had worked under the woman in the white wool coat, the director who bought Evelyn's house. I copied these before I quit, Paula said. I was scared to turn them in. June opened the envelope. Emails, internal memos, a spreadsheet. At the top of one page was a project name, Winter Ridge Senior Transition Pipeline. Beneath it were columns, owner age, health status, living heirs, property control risk, emotional leverage, recommended pressure point. Evelyn read down the list until she found herself. Carter, Evelyn. Age, 72. Widowed. Primary residence, high-value redevelopment parcel. Heirs, cooperative. Subject emotionally attached to property. Recommended pressure point, safety concerns, / burden framing, / holiday relocation window. Holiday relocation window. Those 3 words made the lobby disappear. They had chosen Christmas on purpose, not because the buyer was in a hurry, not because paperwork required it, because the holidays made old people easier to break, because neighbors were busy, because shame kept families quiet, because a mother standing in the snow under Christmas lights looked like private sadness, not organized theft. Evelyn sat down slowly. No one spoke. Even June, who always had something sharp to say, covered her mouth with one hand and turned away. At the bottom of the email chain was Michael's reply. Understood. She'll resist emotionally, but we can manage. D is aligned. D, Diane. Aligned.
There are words that end a relationship more completely than screaming ever could. Aligned was one of them. The Attorney General's office received the files the next morning. By the end of the week, Harrington's offices were raided. The woman in the white wool coat resigned. 3 executives were indicted by spring. Civil suits followed. Then federal investigators became interested because several targeted properties involved interstate development funding. Silver Pines was no longer a joke at the edge of an old highway. It was evidence. It was witness headquarters. It was the place where people who had been quietly pressured, dismissed, and called burdens came to speak into microphones with shaking voices. Evelyn never enjoyed revenge the way she imagined she might. There was no clean satisfaction in seeing Michael's face on the evening news as reporters shouted questions outside his office. No joy when Diane's husband moved out after her name appeared in the lawsuit.
No peace when Harrington froze accounts connected to the Carter house sale. What she felt instead was grief. Because Justice did not return the Christmas mornings Walter made pancakes shaped like reindeer. It did not return the day Michael learned to ride a bike on the driveway. It did not return Diane asleep on the couch under a quilt Evelyn had sewn from old dresses. Justice gave facts. It gave consequences. But it did not give back the version of her children she had loved. That was the part nobody saw on television. In March, Michael came alone. No expensive coat this time, no leather folder, no threats. He looked thinner, older. The investigation had stripped the polish from him and left something raw underneath. Evelyn found him standing outside room 7, staring at the door like it might pronounce sentence. "I didn't think it would go this far," he said. Evelyn was carrying clean towels. She stopped several feet away. "That is not an apology." He nodded, eyes wet. "I know." She waited. He swallowed. "I told myself you'd be safer somewhere else. I told myself the house was too much. I told myself everyone does estate planning. I told myself a lot of things. And the money?" His face folded. "That too." There it was. Small, ugly, true. He looked at her then, not as a consultant, not as a son trying to manage an inconvenient mother, but as a man finally standing in the wreckage he helped create. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know it doesn't fix anything. I don't expect you to forgive me." For a long time, Evelyn said nothing. Then she handed him the towels. "Room 4 needs these." He blinked. "What?" "Room 4. If you want to stand here feeling sorry for yourself, do it while making a bed." It was not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was the only door she could open without lying to herself. Michael took the towels with both hands. He stayed 3 hours. Diane never came. By summer, Silver Pines looked almost unrecognizable. Not polished, not fancy. Better than that, alive. The sign worked again, though the S still flickered when it rained. The office smelled like coffee instead of mildew. Tessa managed bookings from behind the front desk, with her son doing homework nearby. Calvin ran maintenance and complained that guests used too many towels. Ray planted marigolds in cracked tires along the walkway because he said beauty was mostly stubbornness with dirt under its nails. Room 7 remained locked. Not hidden. Honored. Evelyn turned it into a small archive room for families fighting property fraud.
People left copies of deeds, letters, photos, and handwritten testimonies. On the desk, beneath Walter's photograph, she placed Harold Whitcomb's original note. "Don't open room 7 until you're ready to know why they really left." Now people understood. They left because they were pushed. They left because they were shamed. They left because someone convinced them that losing everything was the polite thing to do. And room 7 had waited for someone who had been hurt badly enough to stop being polite. The lawsuit settlement came the following December, almost 1 year after Evelyn had been thrown out. The Carter property sale was voided due to fraud. Harrington Land Group was ordered to pay damages into a victim compensation fund. Evelyn was awarded enough money to buy back the old family house if she wanted. For 2 nights, she could not sleep. Everyone assumed she would reclaim it. Michael did. Ray did. Even June, who pretended not to care about sentimental things, placed the paperwork on Evelyn's desk and said, "You earned the right to walk back through that front door." So Evelyn went. She stood outside the Carter house on a cold afternoon, with snow gathering lightly on the lawn. The new buyers had never moved in after the scandal broke. The windows were dark. Walter's rose bushes had been cut down. The kitchen cabinets were gone, ripped out during the first week of renovation. Evelyn pressed her hand to the front door. She waited for longing to crush her. It did not. She felt sadness, respect, a tenderness for who she had been there. But not home. Home was not walls that remembered you. Home was where people noticed when your coffee went cold. Home was where a pregnant waitress became family, where a frightened mother learned to laugh again, where a bitter old veteran fixed steps because someone might fall, where a little boy called a ruined motel Christmas. Evelyn returned the next morning and signed the old house over to the compensation trust so it could be sold and the money distributed among victims who had lost more than she had. Michael cried when she told him. Diane sent one text. "You always cared more about strangers than us." Evelyn deleted it. That Christmas Eve, Silver Pines had no vacancies. Every room was full. Not with tourists, with people who had nowhere better to be and somehow discovered that was not the same as having nowhere to belong. Nora brought her baby, a round-cheeked little girl named Clara, after Harold's wife. June made terrible eggnog and defended it like a constitutional right. Calvin dressed as Santa for exactly 12 minutes before declaring the beard a health hazard. Ray fixed the flickering S again, then pretended he had not been crying when everyone applauded. At 9 o'clock, Evelyn slipped away to room 7. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room was warm now, clean. Shelves lined the walls. Boxes sat labeled and safe. Walter's photograph rested on the desk beside Harold and Clara's. For the first time, Evelyn removed the cloth from the mirror. An old woman looked back at her. White hair, tired eyes, strong hands. Not discarded, not rescued, not waiting for anyone's permission to matter. Behind her, reflected in the glass, the open door showed the lobby glowing with Christmas lights and movement and life. Evelyn smiled. A year earlier, her children had thrown her out before Christmas because they believed her story was finished. They were wrong. They had not ended her life. They had only delivered her to the place where it was finally ready to begin. And outside, above the snow-covered parking lot, the Silver Pines sign flickered once, then burned steady through the dark.